If you truly want to understand a person, you shouldn't focus on what they say, but on how they say it. Psychologists have been doing this for years. In this video, I explain 5 clear methods psychologists use to understand people. These are not tests, not guesses, but silent signals that reveal a person's character, defenses, and inner world. By the end of this video, your perspective on reading people will change significantly. Number 1. Paying attention not to the story itself, but to the details that are skipped. The most common mistake people make when trying to understand others is focusing on the story being told. For a psychologist, however, the real data is not what is said, but what is deliberately or unconsciously left out. The human mind is programmed to hide, neutralize, or quickly pass over information it perceives as threatening. When someone tells a story, there are moments where the flow breaks. Sentences become shorter, the tone of voice changes, the narration speeds up, or the topic suddenly shifts in another direction. This is not a conscious lie. It is the mind signaling, "Don't go too deep here." This is exactly where a psychologist pauses. Because these gaps point to areas where the person experiences guilt, shame, fear, or suppressed anger. People don't leave out details to look good, they leave them out to protect themselves. Especially memories where they felt a loss of control, weakness, or damage to their self-image are quietly removed from the story. Phrases like, "Anyway, it's over, it's not that important," or "let's not go into that," are psychologically high-signal statements. Because the places the mind labels as unimportant are often the places carrying the heaviest emotional load. When a psychologist notices what is missing, they ask one question: if this detail were included in the story, which image of the person would collapse? That's where the answer is hidden. If someone positions themselves as strong, right, or rational, the skipped details usually relate to weakness, indecision, or emotional need. The mind automatically censors information that threatens the self-image. That's why in psychological evaluation, the key issue is not whether the story is true, but where the story has holes. A person is most recognizable through what they hide, and most of the time, they aren't even aware they are hiding it. The details left untold are the most honest data about who someone is. Because consciousness can control speech, but the unconscious reveals itself through silence. Number 2, how they describe others, not themselves. One of the fastest ways to understand a person is not by what they say about themselves, but by how they talk about others. When people talk about themselves, they create a conscious narrative. But when they describe others, they unknowingly project their inner world outward. In psychology, this is called the projection mechanism. People place traits, emotions, or impulses they struggle to accept in themselves onto others. Statements like, "people are selfish," "everyone is manipulative," or "you can't trust anyone," are not objective observations about the world. They are the sound of the person's internal conflicts. For a psychologist, these sentences don't describe the outside world, they describe the speaker's inner landscape. More importantly, the language someone uses to label others is often the same language they use internally toward themselves. Someone who constantly judges others usually judges themselves harshly as well. Someone who sees others as weak often has a deep fear of feeling weak. Someone who labels others as incompetent is often trying to constantly prove their own competence. Language is the external expression of internal dialogue. A psychologist pays special attention to descriptions charged with strong emotion. Excessive anger, contempt, or sarcasm indicate that the person is triggered at that point. Because when something touches an unresolved part of the self, emotional intensity rises. Neutral topics are not described with such force. In other words, what makes someone annoying is often not the other person, but the unresolved issue within the speaker. Additionally, when people talk about others, they reveal their perception of power dynamics. Some describe others from a superior position. Some constantly place themselves as victims. Some perceive everyone as a threat. This reveals how the person experiences the world. Is the world dangerous, competitive, unfair, or safe? This perception is shaped by past experiences and attachment patterns. Ultimately, the sentences a person forms about others are declarations of character. Someone can hide themselves, construct an image, or try to appear strong. But when talking about others, the masks fall. Because people don't see the world as it is, they see it as they are. Number 3, the questions that make them uncomfortable. One of the most powerful ways to understand a person is not by the answers they give to every question, but by which questions make them uncomfortable. Discomfort is not a reaction of the intellect, it is a reaction of the self. People don't avoid informational questions, but they become uneasy when questions touch their identity, wounds, or defenses. Psychologically, discomfort signals that a defense mechanism has been activated. The question has triggered an area the person is unconsciously trying to protect. This area is often a suppressed emotion, an unresolved experience, or a truth about themselves they don't want to see. No matter how simple a question appears, if it touches something deep, the reaction will be strong. A psychologist doesn't only read discomfort through silence, but through how the answer is given. Changing the subject, joking, excessive defensiveness, sarcasm, or sudden anger all send the same message: don't touch this. Because people don't want to stay in places where they don't feel safe. Why questions are especially critical here? Why does this keep happening? Why do you struggle with this? Why do you keep doing this? These questions demand responsibility for one's own behavior. When someone avoids them, it usually reflects guilt or fear of losing control. Discomfort is the postponement of an internal confrontation. Another important point is when discomfort consistently appears around the same theme. Relationships, money, failure, loneliness, the past, wherever the same tension repeatedly arises, there is an unworked psychological area. People are explanatory where they feel strong. They become blocked where they feel weak. In the end, an uncomfortable question is not a wrong question, it's an early one. And that discomfort points not to boundaries, but to vulnerabilities. The questions someone avoids are the unfinished sentences of their identity. For a psychologist, the real answers are not found in loud responses, but in the tense silences that appear when a question is asked. Number 4, the way they express their emotions. To understand someone's emotional world, there is a more valuable question than, "What do you feel?" That question is, "How do you describe it?" Because emotions emerge before words. But the way they are put into words reveals the person's relationship with those emotions. Psychologically, people express emotions in 3 main ways: regulating, suppressing, or overflowing. Those who regulate say things like, "I felt angry, but I understand why." This shows the emotion is being managed. Those who suppress focus on events, logic, and details, while the emotional layer remains vague. The goal is not to understand the emotion, but to distance from it. Those who overflow cannot contain the emotion in words. Their narration includes dramatization, intense body language, and exaggeration. In this case, the emotion controls the person. A psychologist listens not only to content, but to tone, speed, and repetition. If someone keeps repeating the same word while describing a feeling, that emotion has not been processed. Vague statements like, "I felt bad," indicate low emotional awareness. A person who cannot differentiate emotions cannot transform them, they can only carry them. Even more telling is when emotions are described through others. Statements like, "People make me angry," or "Everyone disappoints me," externalize emotion. The feeling exists, but ownership is avoided. Silence is also a form of emotional expression. People who go quiet, change the subject, or laugh when emotions arise often have learned emotional avoidance. They may appear strong, but they have learned not to express emotions, only to hide them. Emotional maturity is not measured by how much someone feels, but by how they carry and articulate those feelings. As words become clearer, emotions calm down. As expression becomes more chaotic, the emotion remains unresolved. For a psychologist, the essence of emotion is not in the story, but in how the story is told. Number 5, repeating life patterns. One of the strongest ways to understand a person's character and unconscious dynamics is to look at the repeating patterns in their life. People unconsciously choose what is familiar not because it is good, but because it is known. Repeated relationship types, recurring disappointments, or the same outcomes in different environments are not coincidences. They are the unconscious expressing itself through repetition. Psychologically, repeating life patterns often originate in early experiences. A person recreates childhood relational models in adulthood with different faces but the same script. Someone drawn to emotionally unavailable partners is often reproducing a familiar emotional distance. The goal here is not happiness, but familiarity and predictability. For the unconscious, familiar pain feels safer than unfamiliar happiness. A psychologist doesn't ask, "What happened?" but "Where has this happened before?" Because even if the content changes, the structure remains the same. Different jobs, same sense of worthlessness. Different relationships, same abandonment. Different goals, same last-minute withdrawal. These repetitions reveal the person's core relational blueprint with themselves and the world. Most of these cycles operate outside awareness. People blame circumstances, people, timing, bad luck, but what repeats is not the external world, but the person's automatic responses. The same boundaries not being set, the same silences, the same self-abandonment create the cycle. Some patterns function as self-fulfilling prophecies. A person carries the unconscious belief, "I am not valued," and unknowingly moves toward situations that confirm it. When value is not given, it is interpreted as fate. The cycle continues and strengthens. People stay where they are not because they don't try change, but because they perceive change as a threat. Noticing repeating life patterns is the first and hardest step of psychological change, because it requires seeing one's own role in what happens. This is not guilt, it is responsibility. A cycle can only break when someone shifts from, "This always happens to me," to, "This is a pattern I am creating." For a psychologist, repeating patterns are the most honest narrative of a person's life. No matter what someone says, their life structure does not lie. It shows where they are stuck, where they avoid, and where they abandon themselves. And only when these patterns are recognized can a truly new story begin. Understanding a person is harder than it seems. But when you know these 5 methods, people will no longer feel as closed off to you as before. You will start noticing what they skip, how they define others, which questions tense them, and what they repeat in their lives. And most importantly, you will learn not to take what you see personally. If you want to understand human behavior more deeply, see more clearly in relationships, and look at psychology through this lens, stay on the channel. Because here, we don't talk about what's visible on the surface, we talk about what lies underneath.